What's going on, everyone? Welcome to today's video. In this one, we will be talking about Granblue Fantasy Relink. Now, when you think of Granblue Fantasy, a series that's been around for a long time on mobile has now made its way to console and PC in the form of a full-fledged action JRPG. In this video, I will be giving you all my full review of Granblue Fantasy Relink. This new entry in the franchise has been in development for 8 years, and now that it's finally here, I'm super excited to let you all know what I think. And small spoiler, I think this game is absolutely incredible. I've completed the main story and some of the post-game content, and this game does a lot of really impressive things that set it apart from just being another action JRPG. Now let's kick things off and start off with the story. It feels pretty standard in terms of what you'd expect from a fantasy JRPG. It follows a group of Skyfarers on a quest to search for a mysterious island that can grant wishes. I think this story shines the most when it focuses on the characters themselves rather than the ultimate goal they're trying to achieve. There's certain points in the main story though where things do start to get interesting, and some of the storytelling tropes that we all come to expect from JRPGs deviate a bit, and it creates a nice sense of discovery as the story progresses further. The story itself is not extremely long. It's broken into 10 super concise chapters. The thing I want to give credit to Granblue Fantasy Relink for is the lack of bloat typically used in RPGs to slow the pace of the game down and add length to the overall experience. You won't find that here. Relink's main story is filled with action at every turn, and sometimes you're left with little room to breathe between huge action set pieces, and I really applaud it for that. This game respects your time, and with the end game kind of being a huge appeal of this one, I appreciate it for doing that. The main story focuses on a specific group of characters, but Granblue Fantasy, being a mobile game, has a ton of characters, and some of them are playable outside of the main crew. These characters can be summoned with tickets that you gain throughout the game. They can be added to your party, and every character is fully playable. So you're not stuck with the main protagonist if your playstyle doesn't match up with them. I loved experimenting with different characters and finding the one I liked playing with the most. Sometimes switching it up for a nice change of pace will completely change the feel of the game and the flow of the combat. Each character feels vastly different to play with, and that's impressive seeing as to how mechanically deep the combat system actually is here. And with that said, let's jump into my favorite aspect of the game, and that's the combat. There's a lot to love here when it comes to the combat in Granblue Fantasy Relink. At a base level, you have arts and normal attacks. As you land regular attacks and combos, your arts gain level increases, and with these level increases, they become more powerful. So stacking these art levels with normal attacks can be super useful. For example, I had an attack increase art that would increase my damage of my normal attacks. So basically what I would do is I would use my normal attacks to increase my arts level. And then once my arts level was increased to the maximum level, I would use my attack buff and then return to my normal attacks. And this actually made a massive impact on the amount of damage I was dealing. It was really incredible. And in fact, I applaud this game because there's very few games out there that can make all of the upgrades and buffs and use of the mechanics to deal more damage actually make an immediately noticeable improvement. There's also what's called Skybound arts, which are ultimate attacks that are uniquely different for each character. The thing I like the most about how it's done here is the way you can chain them together. If all the characters' gauges are filled and you let off your ultimate attack, each member can let off theirs in a chain of succession, ultimately unleashing an all-out attack of sorts that deals an incredible amount of damage and honestly looks really, really impressive. There's a lot of thought and creativity put into the combat system here, and it is very strategic for an action game. If you thought you could jump in and button mash your way through this one, then you have another thing coming, because using these mechanics to their fullest is absolutely essential to overcoming some really challenging boss fights throughout the game. Speaking of boss fights, these seem to be the main focus of Relink. They can be larger than life Final Fantasy 16-esque sequences or more grounded, thought-provoking type challenges, but each one is sure to have its own unique set of circumstances and challenges you will need to overcome. Let me give you an example here. Bosses have ultimate transformations with mode bars, for example, that will fill up as it takes damage, and when it maxes out, it goes into overdrive, which completely changes the pace of the fight. Conversely, while in overdrive, the mode will deplete, and once it's depleted, it goes into a break status where it takes extra damage. You will need to keep track of the stages the boss is at and adjust your strategy accordingly. The depth of the combat mechanics in this game are incredibly impressive, and some of these fights will have you sweating for sure. Outside of the main story and combat, Granblue Fantasy Relink is a pure JRPG through and through. You can pick up side quests, upgrade your weapons, craft new weapons, and explore the areas and towns to find loot. This feels like a true fantasy JRPG, and that's something I have been craving for a really long time. I really like the weapon designs, I love the character designs, and I can't say enough positive things about the animations in and out of combat. I also love the UI, the art for the characters is impressive, and navigating the menus to do what you need to do is well thought out and never really feels cumbersome. As for the art style, if you've been around this channel for a while now, you know I'm a huge fan of the cel-shaded kind of painterly art style. I think these hold up the best and allow for some real creativity and personality in the way of visuals and how they're delivered. Granblue Fantasy Relink does this amazingly well. The game is bright and colorful, and each sky island feels vastly different. The enemy and boss designs are some of the best I've seen in a really long time. If you are looking for a visually stunning fantasy JRPG, you can't go wrong here because it definitely delivers in that department. I spoke earlier about the ability to pick up quests. Well, Granblue Fantasy Relink's quests allow for some multiplayer co-op action here, and it's really well executed in my opinion. So during the post game and actually throughout the main story, you can pick up quests. These take after the Monster Hunter formula where you'll basically gather a team to complete these quests. Things like fighting waves of enemies or defeating bosses. These will earn you great rewards to help upgrade your team's weapons and sigils. Sigils are these orbs of sorts that you can equip to a character that give them upgrades like more potion inventory or higher health, etc. Upgrading these can have a huge effect on the moment-to-moment combat, so don't overlook it as it is incredibly useful as you try to progress through the post-game content. I won't dive super deep into the post-game stuff because I'm not too deep into it myself just yet, but there's a lot there, and the hook is infinitely addictive. If you like the combat and the different fighting styles of the characters, you'll find yourself spending dozens of hours in this game after the credits roll. As a real quick aside, for those of you that were nervous that Cygame's mobile roots would creep into Granblue Fantasy Relink, can definitely breathe a sigh of relief. There are no gacha microtransaction mechanics here. There's no way to use real money to upgrade your gear or get more powerful characters. Everything can be unlocked through playing the game, which is the way I like it personally. When I first picked up Granblue Fantasy Relink, I was definitely intrigued. I had a lot of questions and was skeptical if I'm being honest. Would this feel like a mobile game on console? Would they try too hard to reinvent the wheel? Among many, many more, but I can honestly say that Granblue Fantasy Relink delivers an amazing action JRPG with innovative combat, an incredible cast of characters, and a world that I thoroughly enjoyed exploring. If you're a fan of JRPGs, then this is an absolute must play. I fully recommend Granblue Fantasy Relink. You can't miss this one for sure. And it was a surprise, you have things like a Dragon, Infinite Wealth, Persona 3 Reload, Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth, and I did feel like Granblue Fantasy Relink was going to get lost in the mix a little bit, but I'm really glad I picked this one up, immediately started playing it, and I was so hooked. I could not put this game down. The moment-to-moment gameplay, the combat, the pacing, it all is just so concise and well executed. I constantly felt like I was making progress. Every time I picked up this game for a play session, got through a chapter, and stood up after some large-scale, insane string of boss fights. This game just is overwhelmingly amazing in my opinion. It is a ton of fun, and it is a must-play for any fan of the genre. Well, everyone, that's it for my review of Granblue Fantasy Relink. Thanks again for stopping by as always. I'll continue to play a lot of the post-game content, and I'll deliver some videos as I make my way through it. I may need to take a small break for a bit though as I dive deep into Persona 3 Reload. I'm a gigantic Persona fan, and right now I'm a couple hours into Reload, and I can honestly say I love what they're doing with this remake. Man, what a time to be a fan of JRPGs. Like, am I right? I'm definitely feeling a bit spoiled right now for sure. Anyway, before I dip out, I want to let you all know that I have a Discord for us, and I've left a link down in the description below. If you're a JRPG fan, you like talking about JRPGs, jump in there, join the Discord, hang out with us, and let us know what you're playing. If you're new here and you enjoy this type of content, then be sure to subscribe. Let me know in the comments below if you pick this game up. What do you think? And I'm honestly interested, what character do you enjoy playing with the most? But that's it for me on this one. So until next time, I'm out.